Hello, and welcome to Timing is Everything, a program of Care Dimensions, formerly Hospice of the North Shore in Greater Boston. My name is Mary Crowe. I'm the Director of Professional and Community Education at Care Dimensions. We are so happy to have Bob Hagopian, who is one of the chaplains at Care Dimension, back with us today. We had the good fortune of having Bob onto the program about a month ago, and we started to talk about the grief around having a loved one with Alzheimer's and dementia. And, you know, there's so much information on this topic, Bob, that we just felt like we have to come back to this and talk some more about it. So I am so grateful for you coming back to the show. And for those who didn't get to tune in the last time, would you just mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background here?
Certainly, Mary. Thank you so much for having me back. It's a great experience, and I'm glad we can share our knowledge and experience with your viewers and with the families that we serve. I've been working in hospice now for almost 8 years. I've been a minister for 20, and with Care Dimensions now coming up on 4 of those years. I'm also a fire and police chaplain, and I was a call firefighter for 14 of those years. I've had a lot of experience with critical incident stress, and most importantly though, especially in regard to this topic, my mother had Alzheimer's for 8 years, and it took her life in 1995. So I've had personal experience with this that I feel helps me to understand our patients and our families as they're going through this.
Yeah, and you know, Bob, thank you for sharing that, because again, it's really important that people understand, because certainly when people hear hospice, they automatically think cancer. We know differently. We know that, again, this is for any illness that's a terminal illness or people with advanced illness, and that people don't have to be actively dying. But again, Alzheimer's disease is one of those diseases that we have many people on service that have Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia. So people don't understand that, again, hospice services are very appropriate for people in this situation.
Absolutely.
So you see this both personally and professionally.
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, if I may,
of course,
a good majority, I'd say probably 68 to 70% of my patient census are dementia Alzheimer's patients.
Okay, wow, so very significant.
Yeah.
So, you know, we didn't get to talk, it's just such a short period of time, and it's really an important topic. And, you know, I have shared with you that I've certainly, my profession is medical social work for the past 35 years. I've been working with people around advanced illness and end of life during that time, and also dealing with this personally myself, and do a lot of teaching around Alzheimer's and dementia, but, and now also my mother has Alzheimer's. So, and I want to share that just because, again, we can give both the personal and professional perspective on this and the impact that this can have on families. So we didn't get to talk about last time too. I want to focus today, if we may, on certainly the positives that about caring for a loved one.
Sure.
So I want to go into that. We're going to certainly go into the struggles and also just, you know, some of the ways of helping with caring. But I want to talk too about the spiritual needs of the person with Alzheimer's. You know, there's so many you know, just misconceptions out there. And sometimes people think that a person with Alzheimer's or another dementia, that even if they had a spiritual component or a strong faith, two separate things, right? That can go by the wayside. Tell us about that.
Certainly, and it doesn't go by the wayside. And I like the fact, too, that you mentioned there is a distinction between the religious and the spiritual. Religious is more of going to a particular church or worship service. And the spiritual is the personal faith of the individual. We focus on both, but our primary, at least I know for me, is on the spiritual, because I believe everyone has some spirituality of some kind. Even those who don't have a belief or say they don't have a belief, there's something there that they realize there's something more to this life than just the flesh and bone and our bodies. It's about who we are, our spirit. And the one thing I find that it's helpful for me with my families is to encourage them to remember that person is always in there. And there may be things, there may be touchstones that from that person's life. And that's why it's important to know our patients, but it's also important for family members to know the history of their loved ones. If they went to church a lot, did they love to say the Hail Mary? Did they love to say the Lord's Prayer, the 23rd Psalm? In my experience in 20 years of ministry, I've found that whenever I've gone into a facility or into someone's home that has dementia or Alzheimer's, soon as I read the Lord's Prayer or say the 23rd Psalm to them, they light up.
Yeah.
And you can have a person sitting there just completely out of it, nonverbal, non-responsive.
Yep.
And the moment they start hearing those sacred words, they wake up.
Yes.
And they start reciting them.
Yes. Yep.
I've talked to you before about this. There's plenty of videos out on YouTube you can see of people who respond to this kind of stimuli,
Yes.
whether it's spiritual or whether it's music. You know, I think what it does, it helps us all to understand that person is still in there.
Right.
You know, they are still there, and they are deserving of our attention and our love and compassion.
Absolutely. You know, it's such an important point, Bob, because I can only imagine, and again, dealing with this personally, I definitely sense this sometimes. The person feels invisible.
Right.
They don't feel seen. And I just, it's so important for us to, again, be totally with that person and to let them know that you do, that you see them, you're with them, you understand. And we don't always do that.
No, we don't. That's right. Because I think part of it is we could be afraid that that person will not respond. And because it's someone we love and someone maybe we've known all our lives, could be our, like you're dealing with your mother, I was dealing with my mother.
Right.
These are the women that brought us into the world,
Yep.
that gave us life.
Yes.
And whether it's your mother, your father, whoever it is, it's hard to engage because you are looking into this disease,
Right.
into the face of it.
That's right.
And it's painful for the loved one to do that. And that's totally understandable.
Sure.
You know?
Yep.
And that's why I think we can help, and the people who work in our field can help the families to understand you can still engage them.
Absolutely.
They are still there.
Yeah.
You can show them you love them and tell them you love them, and don't think that they don't hear it and they don't understand it.
Yeah.
I've had many situations with our patients where I've gone into a dementia patient, sat next to her and start talking to her, and as soon as I start talking to her and saying, you know, just being loving, being kind,
Yes.
engaging, talking with her, not at her.
Right.
I found a wonderful female patient looked up at me and smiled
Yeah.
and said, "Thank you."
Yep.
Now, this is a woman who hadn't said like 2 words
Sure.
in quite a
Yep.
few weeks,
Yeah.
and it was just like a miracle.
Yes.
But
Well, the feelings are still there.
Yes.
People respond to kindness. They
Right.
respond. So although the conversation or the way we interact needs to be adjusted,
Right.
Because we really do. We have to learn a new way of interacting.
Yes.
We formulate a new relationship with that person because it's different.
That's an excellent
You
point.
know, but even within that, kindness, those feelings remain they're intact.
Right.
As you were mentioning music and all, the parts of the brain where music and feeling are located, they remain intact, even though there are other parts of the brain that are totally affected. So how do we tap into that to maximize quality of life?
Absolutely.
So it sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about in terms
Yes.
of their being there, because there are those components of the brain that work that we should be using.
That's an excellent point, and something I think we all need to remember, that there are access points into that person.
Yeah.
They're still there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes work, it takes time and patience to find them, to discover them.
Yeah.
But they're there.
Yep.
You know? That's
Yeah.
why, as I said, it's good to get to know the person, get to
Right.
know their history,
Yep.
their likes, their dislikes, what they did in their life, things that can...
Exactly.
I remember reading about one program where they took a video projector and they projected on a wall video of a certain place that this person loved. And the person sat there in front of this wall, and of course they thought they were back there again.
Yes.
And it just awakened them.
Yep.
And they started interacting, and they found a measure of joy
Yes.
and a
Yep.
measure of peace.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of creative things I think we can do. We don't necessarily need all the technology, but there's things we can do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We had a particular person on our service, and this woman was in the more advanced stages of the disease process, and she hadn't spoken for a few months, and the family just, on an off chance, had mentioned to the team that she loved the hymn "How Great Thou Art." So the team reacted to that, obviously, and they went and got this hymn on the on nano for her, and they started playing the music, and she sang every word.
Wow.
The family was quite blown away by it, as you can imagine, but
Yes.
also the team. And you might not get that type of a reaction every time, but you can still get a positive reaction, that you're reaching that person in those ways that were so important to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's just imagine that the person is in a prison. Their body is a prison.
Yeah.
Their soul is trapped inside.
Yeah.
They have limited ways of communicating with the outside world. It's like when you walk up to a prison cell and you open the door and you start talking to the prisoner, suddenly the prisoner realizes they're a person. And I think it's the same type of thing, that there's a part of them that will acknowledge that, even if they don't do it physically or audibly, or it's you are making that effort.
Yeah.
And
the
kindness
connection,
goes a
the
long way,
connection,
right?
yeah,
Showing
it's
that
all
kindness.
about the connection.
It is.
The other piece to it, and it's so hard for families because, again, there's so many feelings associated with it. So I think one of the biggest things that families can do is to get more education around
Yes.
it, as hard as it is, because, again, it's hard not to get frustrated because there are behavioral changes.
Right.
There's all kinds, and we'll talk more about these struggles, but one of them is that there are changes in personality and behaviors, things like that, and people react to it, and I certainly, as a family member, and you might relate, is that you want the person the way they were.
Right.
And we respond to them in that way, even though that there are these changes. So even those who know and understand the disease, it's our family member, and we respond differently.
Absolutely.
So I think education is one of the key tools for people in terms of getting a better handle on the disease process. Even though, again, it's not a cookie-cutter approach. Everybody's different in their journey, but we can get some understanding.
I agree, absolutely. When I went through this with my mother, and she passed away in 1995, there was very little information out there. But I did my own research. I looked into things and similar things. I think I may have mentioned on the previous program, I read a book called Coma, and it wasn't the one they made a movie out of, where this doctor was using an approach with coma patients, and he was actually connecting with them, and they would actually emerge for a short time from the coma to be able to talk to their family. It wasn't always successful, all that, but the point is, the education is key. And what I love about this now at this point in time is we've had so many great people, researchers, medical folks, doctors, social workers, all the folks working in the hospice field, who have done so much had gained so much experience and done so much research on ways in which we can make those connections.
Absolutely.
And there are things we can do.
Yeah, there's a wonderful documentary out called Alive Inside.
Yes.
And it shows what you're referring to also in terms of, again, these are people who are very advanced in their disease process, and how, like you say, the part of the brain where music is located thankfully is not touched, and how you can access those memories.
Right.
And again, people, it's really quite astonishing. So if people have an opportunity, I would advise them to be able to look at those types of resources, because they can be very helpful.
Absolutely, and there's so many, the Alzheimer's Association, there's so many organizations out there that have a wealth of information that can be so helpful. And in addition, as we do with our families, is be able to provide the support that those families need that goes with the education.
Right.
And so that they can see, okay, if I try it this way, if I learn how to do this a different way, I might get a better result.
Right.
And to encourage them and show them, say, you know what, this may not work immediately, it may not work every time, but don't give up.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's another piece too. We have a dementia support program.
Right.
And people, again, they don't understand it because they don't understand sometimes that, again, when it's appropriate for somebody to come on hospice with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another dementia. But it is, and again, people wait way too long. And to get people on service sooner, there's so much support around that, and again, adding to quality of life.
Right.
So there's so many components to that in terms of sensory stimulation, the complementary therapies with music and pet therapy and all other things, the support of the team. The family needs this additional support as well. So it's for both the individual and to that added tender, loving care, that extra support, but also for the family too.
Right.
So there's so much to that. So I would certainly advise people to look into that as well.
Absolutely. You really touched on something. I've said this over and over again, and you've heard me say this, and I probably said it in the other program I was on. Hospice is not about death. It is about life.
Yeah.
Life is time. We try to buy more time for those folks that are in our care and for their families. So you're absolutely right about that. The sooner they come to us, the better the experience will be.
Yeah.
We can't change the outcome.
Right.
No one can.
Yep.
But we can make a difference between now and then.
Yep. And the thing about time is, it's the quality. That's what it's really about, right?
Absolutely.
So it's, some people might have limited time, but you can live a lifetime in a short period.
Amen to that.
And I think that people, again, we put so much emphasis on quantity that really the focus should be on quality. So it's about how to live for whatever time the person has left. And that's the wonderful thing about hospice care. So, and again, that goes for people with Alzheimer's and dementia as well. Let's break it down a little bit too. So let's talk about some of the positive aspects. So talking today about families and the impact that having a loved one with Alzheimer's, it's very different from having a loved one with another type of disease. So sometimes I feel like, geez, you have to dig sometimes, right? Because this is agonizing to have a loved one with this disease process. But there are positives.
Right.
So how can it impact families in that way that they can pull out those positive things?
Well, I think it's how they connect. The connection, I think, is important.
Yeah.
And the positive experiences that you can have with your loved one could be those moments, and they may be very fleeting.
Yes.
Where they start singing a song that they loved, just like you mentioned about that hymn.
Yeah.
Or you read them something that they loved, a poem. I had a patient once who loved Robert Frost, and I found a recording of his voice, and I played it for her. And she started saying it out loud with him.
Wow.
It was beautiful. So I would say try to find these ways that you can connect and cherish the moments when it works.
Yes. I refer to those as our moments of grace.
Yes.
Because again, and like you say, they can be fleeting.
Right.
But they're there.
Right.
See, and I think again, there's so much emphasis on what's been lost as opposed to what's left.
Absolutely right. That's it. And I think getting back to what we were saying earlier about that person is still in there.
Right.
As a spiritual person,
Yep.
and I believe that we are not just this body.
Yep.
We are energy. We are soul.
Yep.
And what I always tell my families and my colleagues too, and I see everyone I work with does this, they don't waste any time.
Yeah.
They take every opportunity, like I said, those golden moments that are just so wonderful. Even if you think that person can't hear you, I believe their soul can.
Yeah.
And I believe their soul will remember.
Yeah.
And that I think is the most important part of the healing that can happen.
Absolutely.
In these situations. And I hope that in conveying that to my families, they can feel a bit of that healing, knowing that they are doing something.
Yeah.
They are getting through somehow, even if the person's not reacting or responding.
Right.
They are.
Yeah.
And it's not a pipe dream, it's not a fairy tale. I've seen too many situations where I've seen this happen, and I've had too many experiences in my own life, to me, that validate that.
Sure. I was working with a community group, and the daughter came down. This was in a facility. They had a particular Alzheimer's support group. They asked me to be a guest speaker at, and I had gone, and the daughter came down and said, geez, I don't know why I bother going to visit my mother. She doesn't remember 2 minutes later that I was there. And I said to her, you're so entitled to your feelings.
Right, absolutely.
Her feelings, she needed to have them validated because she is entitled to feel that way.
Right.
There's such grief and sadness around
Yes.
that, because it's wonderful to be remembered, right, in terms of that.
Absolutely.
And so I said, but let me just ask you a question. When you walked into the room, what was your mother's reaction? And the daughter got this beautiful look on her face, and she said to me, she lit up like a Christmas tree.
Oh.
And I said, well, that's your moment of grace.
Amen.
Now, she's not going to remember 2 minutes later, maybe even a minute later, why she feels so nice and good, but you're going to remember that you brought that joy to her. See, that's the hard part. This is work for a family in terms of, again, finding those moments and understanding. Unfortunately, they won't remember that, but you impact the feelings that they have,
Right.
and that will stay. That remains.
That's
it lingers.
an excellent point. And when I look at that, what I try to tell, when these things happen, I try to tell my families, your loved one is giving you a gift.
Yeah. Yes.
Because in that moment, they recognized you, or
Yeah.
in that moment, they responded to your love and kindness, and they smiled.
Yeah.
In that moment, they might have said your name.
Yeah.
You know, that's a gift they're giving you from behind that wall of Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah.
Another thing too, I want to bring out, and you brought it very well, I think, is that when we have people say, I don't know why I bother to go because they don't know I'm there. I always also say to the families, take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It is agonizing.
Mm-hmm.
It's torturous.
Absolutely.
To see your loved one in that state.
Yeah.
And to sit there and perhaps sit there for an hour or two and not a word doesn't pass between you or whatever. Mm-hmm. Go there, but go there when you know you can.
Right.
And when you have built up the strength you need.
Yes.
I always tell my families, and I tell the caregivers who are caring for these folks too, and the staff in the facilities, you need time for yourself.
Yep. Absolutely.
You need to heal. You
Yep.
need to strengthen. You need time away. You need to do something fun.
Yes. Yep.
You know, and don't feel guilty about it.
Right.
Do it because if you do that and you maintain a healthy mind, body, spirit,
Yep.
you will be more present to your loved one.
Yes.
And
that's
your
absolutely right.
efforts might bear more fruit.
That's right. You know, and I always say by helping the family, we're actually helping the patient as well,
Mm-hmm.
or the identified individual with the disease process.
Right.
It's important that we do tend to the whole group,
Yes.
right? So, and I, you know, it's I always say that for caregivers, whether it be a formal or an informal, we sometimes feel like the better caregiver we are is how much care or what we do for that person, as opposed to the better care we take of ourselves. It's counterintuitive, isn't
Yes,
it?
it
The better
is.
care we take of ourselves, that we're actually a better caregiver.
Right.
So I think sometimes we caregive really to our own demise.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't help that person at all.
No.
We're less patient, we're less available, and we could get sick.
Absolutely.
And again, so it's not a selfish act. By taking care of ourselves, we're actually better for that person.
Right.
Yeah, it's so hard for a caregiver to grasp that.
I agree with you. It is. I think they feel guilty
Yeah.
if they're doing something just for themselves. If they're having fun, they
Yeah.
go to the movies or they go out to
Right.
dinner or something.
Yeah.
You know, no. And I also suggest to the families, now, this is your loved one.
Yep.
It may be their parent.
Yep.
They gave you the gift of life. They want you to enjoy it.
Right.
And they would not want you to be miserable.
Yep.
So if you want to go out and do something fun for a
Yep.
change, do it.
Yep.
And know that you have their blessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do feel like we come back to caregiving more refreshed.
Right.
You know, part of this disease process again is that because of the way the behaviors, the repetition, the forgetfulness, that it can be frustrating.
Oh, it is. It's wearing.
Yeah,
on the
it is
person.
wearing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not uncommon that, again, you see increased health issues with the caregiver. People don't, because they're so busy caring for somebody, they're not going to their own doctor's appointments, doing their own things like you suggested in terms of exercise, eating well, sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that really is to their own detriment.
Absolutely.
So, what other things in terms of things that you could suggest for families, or you know, just in terms of caring for themselves, or you know, even how about family spiritual needs as
Right.
well?
Absolutely.
I'm sure that gets neglected.
Oh, absolutely does. And I think that, you know, I encourage my families, whatever is your tradition, whatever is your practice, whatever, maybe you want to explore a different practice.
Yeah.
There are so many wonderful things out there that we can do. And the different religions, the different faith cultures offer so much. And it might be something alien to you. You know, like if someone may have been going to church every Sunday morning, going to Catholic church, a Baptist church, or whatever, and then maybe they can encounter a Buddhist monk. Maybe they can sit down with a Hindu person. Maybe they can read some Muslim poetry. You know, it's the whole point of it is there are so many different spiritual traditions out
Sure.
there that you may be surprised at what you might encounter.
Yeah.
And how the benefit it might bring to you. And in addition, making the time for the things you love to do spiritually.
Yes.
The time for meditation, the
Yeah.
time for prayer, listening to sacred music perhaps, going to a Christian music concert or something. I
Sure.
mean,
Yeah.
it's there's all different things.
Yeah.
And as I said, they need to be encouraged to explore that.
Yep.
And they may be surprised at what it will do.
Yeah, and like you say, spirituality, it really has to do with our core beliefs, values.
Right.
It's not, there are, again, some people are religious and others, but I think everybody's spiritual.
Right.
But it's how we practice it.
You're right.
So, and part of that, again, is doing more of those reflective things and being in touch with the things that we have a passion for.
When I first went to seminary and I encountered centering prayer, and I felt very awkward trying to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just, you sit there and you're like, I should be saying something, and you're not supposed to be. It's hard to be still, to be quiet.
Yeah.
So you're right. When you can try to explore some things that may be pushing the outside of the envelope a little bit, but it may be something that will help bring you a measure of peace, lower your blood pressure, lower your heart rate, increase your circulation, that you can think clearer, you can feel better. Everyone, all the caregivers and the families deserve that.
Yeah. I'll tell you, there's never enough time for this topic, Bob. The time goes by way too fast. We'll have to have you on again. But I just want to put up a slide, just giving a resource. If people have questions, you can contact Care Dimensions. And we, again, around our Dementia Support program and all of that. And I know we have to wrap up, Bob, but I just can't thank you enough for being on the show. Just very briefly, if you have just one word of wisdom that you can just leave the audience with today, what would it be?
Well, Mary, you know me. I can never do just one word. But all I can say is take care of yourself in all the different facets of that, what that care means, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual. Do it.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself. You deserve it, and your loved one deserves it.
Yeah.
And you will be able to endure this storm much better, much safer.
Yeah.
And you will emerge through it a better person.
Oh, well said, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. And I want to
Very
thank the audience for tuning into the show today. And we look forward to having you back on the next Timing is Everything.
Formerly Hospice of the North Shore in Greater Boston is different in that we do more than just hospice.
It's just incredible, the services they provide when people need it the most.
So being able to offer more individualized care helps people feel more cared for.
Because it's about the patient's quality of life.
I don't think there's any place else in the Boston area like Care Dimensions.
At Care Dimensions, we'll take care of your family like you're a part of ours. Visit us at caredimensions.org.